Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Global Game Jam 2022. I'm your host, Alchemist, and I am joined by Robert Anderberg. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. Before the show, we got to talk a little bit, and I have to share this with the rest of you guys. I got to have a bit of a geek out moment because one of the things that Robert worked on was EVE Online, which I'm a huge fan of that game and just what it became. And whew, but that is not the topic of our conversation today, even though we could probably talk about that for another hour, just your journey through game development, because you've been in game dev for quite a while, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so been in game development for about 22 years now. Initially as a C++ programmer, I worked on kind of educational games for BBC Multimedia as my first job, where I made a cake decorating game with an infinite sprinkle engine to stop kids crying in the playtests because they were just really upset that they couldn't just infinitely put sugar on their cakes. And then since then, I've been the lead of small and large teams. Done like console and PC, and I worked at Linden Lab for a while, and then I got out of games and worked at Google for 3.5 years on lots of random things. And then I left Google and started my own company with some friends. And that's what we're doing right now. Yeah, it's a thing called dotbigbang, which is what we're talking about today.
Yep. So tell me a little bit more about dotbigbang, because I've done a little bit of research before the show, and I feel like my understanding of it is not giving it the full credit that it deserves, because it seems like it's one part game engine, one part like sandbox creation tool. I've seen some of the things
Yeah.
people have created from it, and it's spectacular. So can you tell me a little bit more about dotbigbang?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. It's a blend of playing and creating. And, if you think about something like Minecraft and you say, like, how many people who play Minecraft create? Well, the answer is everybody. So, what we wanted to do was build something where the tools to build the games are built straight into the platform. There's no separate download, there's no install. And it runs in a web browser so that like anyone with a web browser, anyone who's got anything that really can run that has access to these tools. And so we also have three classes of creators that we think about. We think about beginner users who've never done anything at all, like just played a game. And then we have skilled users who might have used Redstone in Minecraft or block programming with Scratch. And then we've got advanced users who just want to write code. Like they don't want to do visual stuff and hook everything together. If they know how to write code already, we should just let them do that. So that's obviously like a huge broad spectrum of people to do a good job for. But I think we're kind of getting there, at least on the advanced level and on the beginner level. And then we have some stuff to do to fill in the kind of path in the center. But yeah, it's about building something. Because it's in a web browser, you can just send a link to somebody. You can build with anybody on the planet. Just even if they don't have an account, you can just send them a link to what you're making. They can jump in and play it. And I think that kind of 10 seconds to jump into something that's multiplayer is not really something that exists right now. And I think it unlocks, especially because you can build a multiplayer game, very easily with no setup. I think that unlocks a lot of different types of things that people haven't built before. And then, yeah, just getting people into stuff. I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to get people to play a new game before, but it is difficult. Get them to buy it and install it and everything else. So yeah, that's basically it. It's I kind of think about it like crunchy, lo-fi voxel games in a browser that with everything to make them as well.
Okay. You mentioned it's hard to get people to buy games. As a streamer, there are a lot of times where you're playing a game and you want people to play it with you. And so a lot of times that might just be like playing the game and kind of enjoying it. In other cases, it's just there have been games that have come out that I have just straight up bought like 5 copies of. And then like not even like, oh, it's Christmas and this is a good time to no. You're playing this game because this game is amazing and I need someone to play it with me.
Right.
But one of the things you mentioned about dotbigbang is that it runs in web browsers. What was the thinking behind having it run in a browser? And are there any kind of advantages that people may not realize to doing it this way?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is a bit of a weird choice. Like we're all C++ developers and game developers, and the general feeling I think about web browsers in the game development community is that it's like a tool for, not serious programmers, and that JavaScript or, TypeScript is not a real language. I think there's a lot of snobbery in game development. I think there's a lot of people like, oh, well, if you write in C# and Unity, you're not a real game developer. If you don't make console games, you're not a real game developer. And I think, you can take that all the way back to the source. But if you want to develop something that anybody can access and that is, turns on instantly and people can just get into, then there's really no other platform that exists on the planet that can do it. And, there's like 2.3 billion monthly active Chrome users that have 3D enabled. So when you think about that and you think about, hey, you could make a game and that game could get played by, hundreds of millions of people, and they wouldn't have to install anything, and that could go viral. I think, there's a thing that can be built, which is kind of like YouTube for games, or something that could be, change the way games are made, that hasn't been made yet. And I don't know if it's dotbigbang. I think dotbigbang's pretty cool. Obviously, we spent a bunch of time and energy doing it, but I think there's something that these other platforms or other similar platforms, haven't yet addressed, which is first of all, accessibility. There's, what is it, like 20 million Chromebooks in the US, and none of them run Unity. So, when you think about, like, you can't run most game development tools on a Chromebook, even if you can run Android apps, like there's almost no development tools on Android that's, for serious tools. So now you can take those devices and you can go and, learn to program, or you can make a game, or you can do that with your friends, and there's no restrictions. So I think in terms of accessibility, there's no better way to do it. And then in terms of limitations, like, there are limitations in the browser, but dotbigbang isn't anywhere near them. Like, we can probably go 5 times faster than we already are, and that's just time and effort and energy and, optimization. But I also think that it's easy to focus on, like, how big can you make something, and can I put 1,000 people in it, and can I do this? And, if you think about your favorite games, or the most impactful moments that you had in a game, was it with 1,000 other people? Was it with, a game that was 1,000,000 miles in each direction? Or was it like an interaction with another human, or a story moment, or, something? So I don't think that you need, and Minecraft shows us as well, you don't need, a AAA game engine to construct something that really is meaningful and that has value. So that's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on building things that really are, delightful and wholesome and pleasant. And, I think that we're already at a point where you can do that stuff. But, we will keep pushing it. But I think, when people talk about limitations, I just think, well, I started off on an 8-bit computer. When Metal Gear Solid came out on the PlayStation, it blew my mind, and it was cinematic and amazing. And, when we talk about limitations, I often feel like, yeah, but like, come on, you can make a great game on anything. You can make a great game on a Game Boy. So I think I don't view that really as a, often constraints breed creativity anyway, right?
True, very true. A lot of times, I mean, you look at some of the games that kind of we now look at as classics, and a lot of those games were built on certain constraints that they had at the time. I mean, you look at Super Mario Brothers. There was only so much you can do on an 8-bit cartridge because of just space constraints. And to look at that cartridge, the same cartridge that was able to produce Super Mario Brothers was also able to produce The Legend of Zelda, which was a huge open world game that, if you really like, I think most people would argue that the original Legend of Zelda was probably the precursor to a lot of open world games that we know and sometimes deride nowadays. But you mentioned that, you mentioned the limitations of development in a browser. But one thing I wanted to kind of ask you about is there a ceiling to it? Because you mentioned that, you guys are not even pushing it. You guys could push it 5 times faster and things like that. What does the ceiling for development in a browser look like?
That's a great question. There's a bunch of development, right? So, the fundamental baseline thing is it's not running native code. There's a thing today called WebAssembly, where you take like C++ and you compile it into a certain form, and then it'll just run in the browser. And for that type of stuff, it's kind of like 1.5 to 2 times slower than native. But if you think about like a console or a PC today, those devices are so fast that even if you were like 1.5 times slower, again, it's like, do you need to be able to execute something at the scale of Cyberpunk to make a video game? And also, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're building, like, for the type of things that we have our community building and small groups of people,
Right.
I don't think those things become constraints. But yeah, I think there's a bunch of new technologies. There's a thing called Web GPU that's happening, which is giving you a much more direct path to the GPU from the browser, and that's kind of like Vulkan or DX12 compared to DX11
Mm-hmm.
and those older APIs, OpenGL, and that people are going to be able to render stuff in a browser that's going to completely blow you away. So that aspect of it, I think, is going to keep pushing forwards. The aspect of being able to bring more and more kind of C++ native libraries to game engines is going to keep pushing forwards. And I think, again, like when Unity came out, people said it was a toy. People were very dismissive. They were dismissive of C#, they were dismissive of Unity, they were dismissive, like, it's not a real game engine, blah, blah, blah. And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, like any of these things, with persistence, with a lot of persistence and effort and time and energy, Unity is like incredibly successful in terms of just
Yeah.
a piece of technology that I first used at the Dare to be Digital kind of mentoring I was doing in Abate University. They had a game creation contest thing, and like when I first saw it, I was like, C#, like, what are you doing? Like, that's stupid. But of course, it removes that whole complexity of memory. It doesn't really remove the complexity of memory management, but it makes it easier for small games. And again, like, can you take Unity today and can you make an equivalent of the best AAA game on PS5? Well, Genshin Impact is very impressive, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably not. There's still a gap, right? There's still a pretty big
Right.
gap between Ratchet and Clank and Halo and even the best Unity games. But can you make amazing games with Unity that deeply touch people and that people love and that they're amazing?
Mm-hmm.
Of course you can, right? So I think that's really, for me, the focus is, let's get this whole thing to a point where people can build things that they love and that players love, and that you're building awesome stuff. So there is a ceiling, but I don't think that ceiling is the thing that's going to stop people making great games. I think that is like so far in the future that I think it's going to be very surprising to people what people build. It already surprises me what people build using what we've already got, and I know how slow it is. So
So I feel like from your kind of experience as a game dev, it kind of drove some of your passion towards dotbigbang. And as a career game developer, you must have used a lot of different engines and development environments. You mentioned that you started in C#. When you started designing this, were there any quality of life things you built in that you wished other engines may have had that you've worked with in the past? Like, it's not in a bad mouthy kind of way, but just a, man, that would have
no,
been
no,
nice
not
to
at
have
all.
this.
Yeah, I think the thing that you always want when you're making games is you want the smallest amount of time possible between making a change and seeing the result. I think when I was like 7 years old, the computer I had was a BBC Acorn BBC B, 8-bit computer, and you turn it on, and 2 seconds later it goes beep, and then you can type stuff in and like draw lines and make stuff. And
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of tools that we have today, there's like minutes or potentially even hours of time between, like, oh, I have this idea, and expressing that idea. And there's an amazing talk by a guy called Brett Victor called Inventing on Principle, which really drove a lot of what I was thinking about when we were first making dotbigbang. And his whole thing is like, for creative tools to be successful, there has to be this like tiny, smallest possible time between cause and effect. And
Hmm.
that what to a certain extent that does limit you, right? Because if you pre-bake everything in a game and you do the lighting ahead of time and do it offline and pre-compute and spend hours doing stuff, and then at runtime it's going to look beautiful. But now you've got all of this time between, like, oh, I'm going to make a change and then see the result. So one of our guiding principles is to just make everything instant. Like, coding is instant, it's real time. Like when you're typing code in dotbigbang, you see the results instantly. If I'm playing a game and it's something that somebody's made remixable, I can just click the remix button, and in 10 seconds, I've got my own copy of the game, and now I can go and change it. And, you know, if I'm in my own game and you're playing it, I'm already in the editor. The editor is the game. So you can go like, oh, it's really annoying that this cover is in the wrong place. And I can hit edit and change it in real time in multiplayer, and it's instant. And I think, you know, that type of thing, the gap between thinking and doing is so small. It means that, you know, you see it all the time in game development. If it's easy to do something, people will finesse it and polish it and make it beautiful and fun. If it's hard to do it, they'll never touch it. So if I know, you know, this, if I touch this header file, that's a 45-minute recompile, I'm just not going to do that. Like, you know, I'm not going to make this thing nicer. So I think that principle of everything being instant, everything being real time, like everything that you're doing is immediately available to everyone is, you know, it's difficult to execute on, but what we have right now, you know, you can put 50 people in one place and have them build together. So, you know, it's yeah, it's but, you know, the other part to this is when we sponsored Global Game Jam this year, it was kind of a last minute thing. So we weren't really set up to like demo all of this, and even today I was trying to set up to like show you this in real time and live. And, you know, OBS's browser plugin and stuff doesn't want to have the control key go to it. So I can't like actually do it. But, you know, I think showing it live is a much better way to demo this stuff than talk about it, because, you know, it's much more impressive that way.
So before our interview, I went to dotbigbang.com, and I was really surprised at the fact that I was dropped into a world. Like it's one thing to go to a website, and it might have just been the thing that I typed in to create, but I ended up going to the hub world, and I had this kind of moment where I was like, where am I? What just like, I was coming to like get some research done and everything like that. And I was initially kind of shocked. So I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I went to the wrong place. And then I started running around and kind of hopping around, and oh, I can get up. Oh, I like this kind of jump animation. And in no time, like 5 minutes had flown by. And I was like, ooh, I need to get back to work. But with how quickly that was able to kind of draw me in, and that was just the hub world. Like that was just a, hey, here's a thing, go take a look at it. I feel like drawing people in that fast is definitely a benefit. How easy is it to get started making games on .bigbang and to kind of get to grips with the various features? Because as like you mentioned Minecraft and like crafting in Redstone, I've had moments where I'm like, okay, I want to make this 3x3 opening door, and so I know where all of the blocks need to go, and now I got my pistons in the right places and all this other stuff. And then you go and you set all your redstone up, and then you go, okay, I throw this switch and the door should open. Click. What happened? I don't know what's going on. And so, you know, you have to kind of go back through, and that's on a small scale. I can only imagine on something like you said, as big as like a Halo or something like that. If you want to see a change, it can take a while. That's why patches are so important, because it's like, we have identified this thing is broken a month ago, and we have been able to push out that change now. But it seems like .bigbang, because of the nature of how quickly it can kind of adapt to things, that would be a lot easier. Is it easier getting started making games with it, coming from those types of environments?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I think one is, you know, seeing a change when you make it helps you understand the relationship between things. You know, if you change a slider or you change a number and you see it change, you're like, oh, that's what that does. You know, rather than it being a recompile or like waiting around for something to happen. And whenever I've put script languages in games in the past, you know, I've put Lua in a lot of the Lua script language in a lot of like commercial video games and shipped them. That turnaround time is the thing that makes that difference between people wanting to polish and not wanting to, you know, not wanting to touch it. But I think the difference also is, like, I think that snobbery actually extends pretty far in programming, in creation, in development, in lots of areas. And what that means is, you know, there's this kind of like psychological barrier for people, but also just a learning barrier. So what we've tried to do is, you know, when we talk about these 3 levels of creator, like the first thing you can do when you're creating in .bigbang is just throw a bunch of stuff in the world. And we have a bunch of pre-made things that all just do stuff. We've got a bunch of little templates where you can add like jump pads and just silly things. But those jump pads and things are built using the same tools that we use to make the other games. So you can click on a jump pad and you can mess about with it and change its power, but you can also open it up and look inside and go like, oh, this is how this jump pad works. And then you can look at the code and then you can change the code and make your own version. So I think that path, which is, just play with it and explore, that's not really the normal way that people are taught programming. People are taught like, oh, you should learn what a variable is, and you should learn math, and you should learn like, the word radian and the word quaternion, and you should learn like vector, and like there's a list of like 100 words you need to learn before you're even allowed to have a conversation with anybody about making a game. And I think all of that stuff is very frustrating, because when I've done an hour of code, which is this, thing that people do every year, and they go into schools and they help people, learn block programming. I've done that 4 years in my kids' school, and, kids who are 6 and 7 years old can program. Like the problem is the tools. The tool, if you give them like Visual Studio Code, of course they can't do it. But if you give them the concepts and the logical blocks, they can build. So I view our job as getting as close as we can to making that completely seamless for people. And that beginning experience is really simple. We've currently got TypeScript coding. We have the editor from VS Code embedded, so you have like the full TypeScript programming language. You have auto completion. You have all of this stuff that professional programmers use. But it's that middle part, right? You want this journey to start fun and playing around, and then you want there to be a middle bit, and then you want there to be no limit really on what you can build, in terms of it just being a real thing. So yeah, it's easy to get started. We've got quite a lot right now. We're still in alpha, but you can come and hang out with us in Discord, and we'll help you if you want to build stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely, make sure to check that out. We're gonna hopefully we'll get the link. The link is actually in the chat right now. It's https://dotbigbang.com/Discord. That'll take you to the Discord where you can get additional help. So make sure to check that out. And they're also in the chat in Twitch, by the way. Hello, dotbigbang. Appreciate you being in Twitch with us. So one of the things you just mentioned is that dotbigbang uses TypeScript as its coding language. What was the decision to go with TypeScript as opposed to any of the other options that were there?
Yeah, so if you're running stuff in a web browser, and you want to run code natively, which is the fastest way to run it, you only really have a few choices. Originally we did JavaScript, and JavaScript has a bad rap again. Like a lot of professional game developers would consider it kind of a toy language. I think it's actually a very good language with its recent changes. But the problem with JavaScript, really, pure JavaScript, is that it's very easy to make mistakes. If you have a way, for example, to set the position of a game object, then obviously a position is probably like 3 numbers. It's probably X, Y, Z in a space. But with JavaScript, you can pass like the word dog to it, and then unless everything that we do is absolutely perfect, it'll just explode somewhere, and now nothing works. So the kind of lack of kind of safety for what you're doing, it generally causes a lot of bugs which are not about the person's game. They're not about the person's game code. They're just mistakes. And those, when we originally did dotbigbang, we had JavaScript and we had people building, and they would just make a whole bunch of mistakes that were very confusing to them and difficult for us to debug. And then in parallel, TypeScript, which is like a layer on top of JavaScript that has a bunch of types, and then it turns it into JavaScript. So it ends up being JavaScript regardless. Microsoft were doing a great job with it. Via Visual Studio Code, which is Microsoft's editor, has a whole bunch of just amazing features to help you, automatically do these things. And then what it allowed us to do was create this layer where instead of setting the position and passing the word dog, like now it says you can't pass dog because it's supposed to be a number. And then it has like inline help, and it tells you how to call the method and what to do. So all of that stuff where it's helping you and it's kind of showing you, what you should be doing and giving you good feedback and helping you build. I think that's another aspect where if you want people to learn, you kind of have to do a good job of making the tool tell them what they're doing wrong or guide them. And it's much easier to do that with the current system we have with TypeScript. But what I will say is if you can write JavaScript, you can write TypeScript. It's pretty much the same language. It's very, very close. So it isn't like begin again, learn from scratch. It's just there are some small differences.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that Big Bang is still in public alpha, but from what I've seen and what we've talked about, it still seems like there's a lot of stuff that is coming to it and that you can do. What are some of the big things you guys have coming up this year that you can share with us? I know some of that stuff, sometimes you have to keep those cards kind of close to your chest, but if there's anything you can share
Yeah.
with us, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so we are in a public alpha. I think a lot of people would call it a beta or even a release. Like it's
Okay.
solid and there's a bunch of games running on it and it's totally fine. But I think that let's just say in today's game development climate, it is helpful to tell people like, we're not finished. And I think a great way to tell people we're not finished is to keep alpha written on it, because
Mm-hmm.
if you write beta or you say it's finished, people maybe don't realize that it's still in progress and that we have a bunch more
Mm-hmm.
work to do. But in general, we the current big thing that we're doing is we made an original game editor that looked a lot like Unity, and we gave it to
Okay.
a bunch of people, and they were like, "What is this? We can't build anything. It's too confusing. There's too many buttons. It makes no sense." And so the current editor that we have is version 2, and
Okay.
both editors still work, but in the new one, not all of the features of the engine are exposed. So we're currently going through that process of bringing everything to it. We have a creator incubator program where like the developers of dotbigbang directly help people build stuff for free, and it's a free program that you can apply for. And so those people have been building games probably for about a year now, and in order to allow them to put all of their games on the public environment, there's a few more features we need to get out, so we're doing that. That's going to happen in the
Okay.
next couple of weeks. Then we've got a terrain system, so people can sketch out much bigger areas and do much cooler things. And that's solving a problem where people just find it a bit too difficult to kind of construct bigger areas from chunks of stuff from voxel
Mm-hmm.
objects. So just going to let them sketch it out and then throw a bunch of stuff in there. And that's coming probably in the next couple of months. Then we have a couple of big collaborations that we're doing, which are going to get dotbigbang out to many more people, millions of people. Those are in progress right now. We can't really talk about that, but that's like our plan to go bigger. And then
Okay.
in terms of tools in general, we're going to fill in that gap, right? So you're going to be able to throw a bunch of stuff in and play and mess around. You're going to be able to write TypeScript at the other end, but in the middle, you're going to have probably block programming with some graphical stuff to let you
Gotcha.
do exactly that kind of like, hey, I want to make this door open with this switch. Like that should be straightforward to do. It shouldn't be begin to learn programming, some complex thing. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got tons of things planned in terms of the creation tools, just continuing to make them delightful and awesome and fun. And then in terms of the games themselves, like we build games on it and we ship them so that we know that like, oh, these are the problems, so we hit them first. But yeah, lots of stuff
Okay.
happening.
So, okay, based on everything that I've heard and from the research that I've done, this last question feels very kind of salient to Global Game Jam and Big Bang and how those two things kind of intersect. When jammers are trying to figure out what platform they're going to build their game in, because sometimes they only have like 48 hours to build it in, it's a really big decision, and it's one of the decisions that has to be made fairly quickly, because depending on how much time you have, that decision may determine what you can get done. How would you describe Big Bang to jammers who are considering what platform to use, and what would you use as the biggest like selling point for it, or choosing point, because it's free in some
Yeah, yeah,
places?
yeah. It's a free selling point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think collaboration's probably the main one. Like you can collaborate with anybody in real time, in the editor in multiplayer, and you can build stuff out and try out ideas and code stuff and build out levels. I think that kind of real time collaboration part is really cool. And then probably secondly, that you can just have anybody test it. Like while you're building a game jam game, you can send this link to anybody, and then they can jump in and run around and give you feedback. And then when you're finished, you can obviously just distribute it with a single link. There's no need to like somebody always says like, why isn't there a Mac build? It doesn't work on Linux. Like, why can't I play this on my phone?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you build in dotbigbang, all of that stuff will just work. it works on phones, it works on desktop, it works on Mac and Linux and Windows, and it actually runs on Samsung Smart Fridge. I ran it on one of those in Costco. So if you want to target only smart fridges, this is probably a great platform for you. Develop games on your fridge. That's our new logo. That's our new tagline.
I need someone. Listen, jammers that are out there watching this that are like, I'm trying to figure out how to make my game unique. Please, for the love of all that's good in the universe, make a game that I can choose what I'm going to eat by playing the game and then open my fridge and have it. That feels like an untapped market that I feel needs to be addressed.
Collaboration with Samsung coming up. I think those smart fridges actually know what's in the fridge. So maybe we can make a game with what's in the fridge, like like the objects in the game are the objects in the fridge. That's I think it's like you say, it's a huge untapped market. Smart fridges. Samsung, if you're listening.
Samsung, if you're listening, Samsung's competitors, if you're listening, because we want to get this out to as many places as we can. So everybody, smart fridge manufacturers, games can be made. We want it. Robert, thank you very much for coming on and talking to me today about dotbigbang. Where can people find out more information about dotbigbang? Where can they find more information about you? And where can they just connect more with the application and the suite?
Yeah, I think just going to dotbigbang.com should have everything there you need to build stuff and place things. Our Discord is the best place to get problems solved and hang out. I'm in the Discord all the time, as are all of the actual dev team. We don't have any customer service people. We've just got the actual programmers who wrote the engine. So if you want to complain about why something doesn't work, you can come and complain directly to the people who wrote the code.
Politely.
And then we're on exactly. We're on Twitter. I think Discord is the best place.
Okay. Well, chat, you heard that. Best place to connect is on Discord. Again, Robert, thank you very much for coming on. I am looking forward to seeing more from dotbigbang, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of the kind of intersection of dotbigbang and the Global Game Jam. And I'm just excited to have been able to talk to you and geek out about Eve for 5 minutes.
Okay, let me know if you want to talk about Eve anymore.
I'll take you up on that.
Thanks a lot.
All right, chat. See you later. Chat, until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, keep those gloves up, all right? See you soon.